The first Grand Prix to the new rules, and already McLaren are taking a gamble. Why not? Kimi Raikkonen's down in 15th place. There's Jos Verstappen. No sign yet of Kimi Raikkonen. We're expecting him to come shooting down behind Verstappen any moment. Meanwhile, there's a race to get started here. Well, Michael Schumacher has led the World Championship for over 2 years now. Will he still be leading? Will he still be in front at the end of this afternoon? When the lights go out, the race will be on. A giant leap into the unknown in Melbourne begins now! Fabulous start by Panis. Montoya's holding him up. Panis is going to go on the inside of him. It's as you were at the front, the two Ferraris. Coulthard banged into someone there. By the looks of things, the right front of Coulthard. One of the Renaults has lost ground as well. A slightly chaotic start. How is David Coulthard doing though?
I think it was just a bang of the wheels, or did Coulthard just swerve at the last minute? So Ferrari 1-2 then. Montoya maintained third, and Panis about to be overtaken around the outside by a rather feisty Sauber driver. I think it was Heidfeld. Heidfeld then making good ground, but Panis comes back at him for turn 5 and loses out to the second Sauber of Frentzen. Really, remember, Panis on slick tyres then, so until they come up to temperature, the Toyota really struggling on those dry tyres, and the Saubers on their wets. It's a softer rubber, and the tread block moves around, generates heat much more quickly, and Panis really struggling at this stage. But it'll come back to him, providing he shows patience and doesn't throw it off the road.
But all of these drivers that are pouring past him at the moment, Martin, presumably realising they've got to attack him now while the track is at its most slippery. If they get stuck behind him and his tyres start to find grip, presumably they'll be stuck. Look at this now, David Coulthard. He's got to get past Panis. He lunges down the inside. Whoa! Side by side, and look at this. Well, that's Montoya. Looks like he's struggling. The two Saubers have gone past him. Now we know that Montoya is carrying a fair amount of fuel on board. Heidfeld has been explosive in these first few laps.
Montoya on dry tyres too, and just cutting across the nose of Frentzen there. So Montoya just having to be patient and wait for those to come up to grip. As I said, the wet tyres so much more quickly build the heat.
Now Button has got ahead of his teammate Villeneuve, so Jenson Button has had an absolutely sensational start. He was 8th on the grid, and as they go through at the beginning of lap 1, Michael Schumacher leading Barrichello by 1.5 seconds. Heidfeld in 3rd, Montoya 4th, Frentzen 5th. Jenson Button goes up into 6th place. Villeneuve 7th, Alonso in 8th. We're on board though with Montoya attacking back now to the Sauber.
Yes, Montoya beginning to get some confidence. He'll struggle to get round there. The Sauber having the ideal line. But look, that's surprising, isn't it now? Just another half a lap down the road and suddenly Montoya is the man on the move because he's got confidence in those tyres. We think that McLaren are getting ready to stop Coulthard straight away and put him onto slick tyres. We'll look out for that one. But at the moment then, Michael Schumacher leads, Barrichello by 1.5, Heidfeld then, this little scrap, Heidfeld, Montoya and Frentzen, about 7 seconds adrift already. Massive gap the Ferraris have pulled out.
One of the most dynamic Grand Prix starts for many years then. A mixture of the new rules perhaps, but also certainly the track conditions. Now there's a mixture of weights in these cars. The two Saubers we know are quite light. They will have to make fairly early pit stops. We believe that Jenson Button in the BAR and his teammate Jacques Villeneuve perhaps carrying a little bit more fuel. Alonso is lighter than his teammate Trulli. He will also have to stop early, but we think that Montoya is carrying a fair bit of fuel. Tyres are obviously an issue as well, and everybody working out what's going on as it happens, lap by lap.
Panis still struggling on his dry tyres. He slipped back to 11. Haven't seen any sign of Coulthard pitting at this stage. So Montoya then just staying in front of Frentzen. Heidfeld has pulled out a 4/10 of a second gap. Look, they've got the whole pit straight as a lead already. Now Montoya's come up the last corner with more grip on the dry-tyred Williams, more grunt down the straight, and easily through then into 3rd place for Juan Pablo Montoya, and taking candy from a baby, that one. But because he's now on the right tyres.
He's on the right tyre and possibly on the right fuel load as well. Time will tell. This is lap 3. Michael Schumacher. There's David Coulthard into the pits. Ted.
Yes, James, wets off, dries on, so a little bit of fuel as well for David Coulthard. But the critical thing is 2 garages up, Ferrari aren't out, and their 2 drivers are both on wets as well.
Yes, but they're intermediates really, Ted. As I said earlier, they've got a much bigger window. Ferrari can go at that pace for much longer. But that worked out quite well for Coulthard. Be interesting to see if he got through in front of Raikkonen or not. His teammate who pitted right at the beginning of the Grand Prix. I suspect not, actually. We'll keep an eye on that, whether that worked out for Coulthard to pit just into the Grand Prix as opposed to the formation lap as Raikkonen did.
Great racing then for 6th, 7th, 8th places. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Jenson Button, Jacques Villeneuve, Fernando Alonso. There is Button in 6th place at the moment with Alonso bearing down on him. And Alonso on the wet tyres at the moment. You can see Villeneuve as well in the background as Button tries to have a look around Nick Heidfeld. Now Frentzen has got ahead of his teammate Nick Heidfeld, so Frentzen up into 5th place. 2 Ferraris at the front, Montoya 3rd, Frentzen now ahead of Heidfeld, Button still 6th, 7th, Villeneuve 8th, Alonso 9th, Trulli, and 10th, Justin Wilson. What a fantastic start for the Minardi driver. We haven't really seen him yet, but he is, believe me, up there somewhere. There he is at the top of your screen as Button and Alonso, but Villeneuve and Trulli, the 2 BARs racing with the 2 Renaults right there in the middle of the track.
Yes, Justin Wilson, of course, on those same Bridgestone intermediates that are leading the race at the moment. And as I said to him on the grid, he's going to do a bit of giant killing. He certainly is. He's 0.4 of a second ahead of Ralf Schumacher in the 2nd Williams. He's 11th, Ralf Schumacher is 12th. And where does Coulthard come in? I think Coulthard is at the back of the field as the first driver to pit in race conditions. So Raikkonen is let's have a look. It worked out for Raikkonen by some 12 to 14 seconds by pitting at the end of the formation lap, the advantage. And Heidfeld then really struggling to keep Alonso behind him. They're running 6th and 7th. And Alonso now with a better slingshot, and he has a good run. He'll have the inside line down to the far chicane and will take that slot as long as he slows down enough so as not to understeer through the apex, which is exactly what he did, and then takes a nice move to move into 6th place.
Interestingly, Heidfeld is the Sauber driver on the dry tyres at the moment, and although certainly seems to be working with a Michelin dry tyre, seems to be working quite well for Montoya in 3rd place. Heidfeld not really getting them to stick at the moment. His teammate Frentzen, like the 2 Ferraris at the front on this intermediate tyre, is making hay while the sun fails to shine here.
Right, they'll have to pit the Ferraris. They've got to pit now. Montoya's just done a 1:34.6 on his dry tyres, and that compares to 1:37.1 for the 2 leading Ferraris. Their gap will disappear. They will have to pit instantly if they want to fend off Juan Pablo Montoya this afternoon. And in comes Villeneuve.
Yeah, Villeneuve's thinking exactly the same thing. He dives into the pits to take on some dry tyres. Any fuel going in there? Didn't see any fuel going in there. He's carrying a fair bit already, but it's a nice slick stop there by the BAR team. And do we see Ferrari getting ready? No, we don't, not at the moment. So they're not seeing it quite the same way as Martin is. They're going to bide their time a little bit. Perhaps they feel there's some rain coming. Who knows?
Well, Montoya's had another 2 seconds out of them on the first sector of the next lap. That's how much he's gaining. He could take 4 to 5 seconds out of them this lap, and they're just 8 seconds ahead of him. So if now they've got to come out. The Ferrari team will have to stop one of their cars.
And this is what the strategy really didn't want. They were planning to go about 17 or 18 laps into this race before making a stop, and at the moment this is not what they wanted, because Montoya has got quite a bit of fuel in his car and he can go quite a distance into this race before he has to make a stop.
And Rubens Barrichello is under investigation by the stewards as Ralf Schumacher passes Panis. That's for 9th place. Ralf Schumacher now coming up to speed on his slicks, and also then goes straight past must be a Heidfeld struggling. So Ralf Schumacher steaming along. Their wets have absolutely had it. Rubens Barrichello under investigation. He's got a drive-through time penalty, Rubens Barrichello. I can only assume it's for jumping the start. So Barrichello then has to drive through and then make his stop for tyres. That's going to spoil the look of his afternoon.
Indeed it is. Look at this though. Mark Webber attacking Heidfeld. He's got the Toyota behind him as well of Olivier Panis. Panis doesn't make it through, but Webber does, and that gets a big cheer from the Aussie crowd as into the pits comes Jenson Button.
Can't believe Heidfeld didn't pit for tyres. He just fell away. 1 and 2 cars per straight were passing him, and very strange that he did not pit on that lap. Oh, and it's Barrichello's been in the wall.
Yeah, Barrichello, who was due to come in for a drive-through penalty, has hit the wall pretty hard. Now, he's been dropping bits of debris there, Martin, through that sequence of blind bends. We haven't really seen how much he's dropped down, but clearly he's lost his front wing and his rear wing. And, well, that's obviously been a pretty big knock there for Rubens Barrichello. He's out of the race. And will Michael Schumacher be making a stop? We're expecting him in very soon.
fastest man on the racetrack by some margin last time around was David Coulthard. He's back in 17th place now after that early stop. It'll come back to him as all the wet runners have to stop too. But those that started the Grand Prix on slick tyres, on dry tyres with the grooves, which they are not on the Ferrari, they're the Inters I was telling you about, but those drivers that started on dry tyres absolutely hit it right on the head. Absolutely the right thing to do. Barrichello's going to repair backwards. That's in turn 5. He's lost it through turn 5. I would imagine his tyres were beginning to give up. What happens is, with the tread blocks, the rubber moves around, generates a lot more temperature. Great in the wet, but it soon turns all gooey in the dry conditions, despite how good those tyres are, and that is a terrible mess of that car. That will probably be a throw that chassis away when it rips the suspension like that. Frentzen then in the pits. Heidfeld still has not pitted and is lapping 6 to 7 seconds off the pace in the second Sauber. Sauber have been caught sleeping.
Yes, they have a little bit. Their pit work not quite as sharp as it might be. They were in a lap later than the BAR team, and it's certainly going to cost them later in the race. But I wonder, Martin, obviously Barrichello would have been computing the message, you've got to have a drive-through penalty. It had only been announced a few seconds before he lost control of the car there into turn 5. Is there a sense in which do you think he might just have been thinking about and taking his eye off the ball?
And we've got Furman in the wall. Ralph Furman then has also had an accident. He is on dry tyres there. So where is that going to be? That's not turn 5. It looks like the exit of turn 2, something like that. Quite... safety cars on standby.
Is it just beyond the site of Barrichello's accident? It's certainly in the first sector of the lap, and well, obviously we haven't seen exactly what happened to Furman there, but one wonders whether he got connected with Barrichello. Here's Michael Schumacher though, and obviously Ferrari aware that the safety car is on standby. They want to get this guy in and back out again on the right tyres before that safety car is deployed, if it's going to be.
But they've waited too long, James. They should have pitted a while ago, because Montoya had already taken the lead as Michael turned into the pit lane, and they've really waited far too long on that Ferrari. We think he's got good speed this afternoon. He may be able to make the deficit. Rear left has not gone on properly. It's all falling apart for Ferrari. Barrichello in the wall, Schumacher late in the pits.
And the fastest man on the racetrack at the moment is Fernando Alonso in the Renault. Well, our information is... Oh, he crossed the yellow line, did he? No, he didn't. It's the inside line. Beg your pardon. Yeah, Fernando Alonso in the Renault, the fastest man on the racetrack. Montoya leads on lap 8 as Nick Heidfeld comes in the Sauber. Montoya leads by 6.6 seconds from Alonso. Trulli is third in the other Renault. And Ralf Schumacher is up from 9th to 4th now in the Williams. Webber is 5th for Jaguar, where he finished last year's Grand Prix in the Minardi. An amazing story that was, and could he repeat it here this afternoon? Panis is also 6th. 7th is Raikkonen, 8th now Michael Schumacher. Remind you that points down to 8th place is one of the D'Amata in the Toyota, the new boy. So not a great day for the debutantes. Furman in the wall and D'Amata in the Sandtrap.
Challenging conditions, but no excuses at this level, and no excuses for the teams either. And that is Furman going off in turn 5 as well, and crossing the debris of the broken Ferrari of Barrichello. So exactly the same place. I wonder if there's a little bit of oil down there, a bit of dirt, because he had an identical accident to Rubens Barrichello. And safety car is out to recover the debris and the car. That is bad news for Montoya, because it's working out, and Alonso, working out beautifully for them, and they'd pulled a gap on the Ferraris. But I just don't understand why some of these teams have been so asleep this afternoon, James. As soon as Montoya starts popping in sector times that's 2 seconds faster than anybody on wet tyres, that is, there's the cue. It can't be any easier for you. The sector time comes up in bright red on the computer screens.
Olivier Panis in the Toyota then comes into the pits, taking advantage of this safety car period. He put fuel into that car as well. That may well work out quite well for him. Mark Webber in your top of your screens is also taking advantage of this period of safety car. lap 9 of the Australian Grand Prix. We have a safety car here. Justin Wilson has made a pit stop, his first pit stop in Formula 1 for Minardi, which has dropped him down into 16th place. Also coming into the pits, we saw Mark Webber. But ahead of the field here, behind this safety car, is Juan Montoya, with Fernando Alonso on his first outing with Renault, currently running in 2nd place. And he was the fastest man on the racetrack just before the incidents involving Ralph Furman, Rubens Barrichello and D'Amato. Here is the D'Amato incident, Martin.
Yes, he was having a go at passing the Jaguar and just came in way too deep into the corner, way too far on the right hand side, where it would be quite dirty, and just spins off into the gravel trap. There's no way out there. Michael Schumacher was coming out of his somewhat late pit stop. Schumacher's back in 7th place now. That's how badly that worked out for him. I tell you who's going to be very, very happy about this are McLaren. They're 6th and 8th. Their early pit stops and keeping it on the road, they've just come steaming through the field nicely as everybody else has pitted. Panis did a good job as well, because he's got quite a lot of fuel on board now by pitting. Anybody who pitted under the safety car basically gets a free refuel as you all zoom back up to the Snake.
Here's another look then at the start of the Grand Prix. Rubens Barrichello was given a drive-through penalty. He didn't take it because he crashed. Yeah, you could see clearly, Martin.
It just crept away. The clutch started to overheat and started pulling away. I mean, Rubens is a passenger at that time anyway. He's just pressing a button, and the software's handling all of that. That'll be gone for the British Grand Prix, taken away. But I don't believe that'll be Rubens' fault, actually. And I would think he'd be quite unhappy about the afternoon. And you may well be right, James. He will have just have been told he's got to drive through and he's got to make a pit stop as well. And they have to be separate incidents. You can't take your drive-through as a pit stop at the same time and take advantage of it.
Yeah, pretty tough for him. Talking to Rubens last night after qualifying, and he was saying that he feels so much more on top of Formula 1 now, so much more mentally strong. And I think that was perhaps just too big a test for him, getting that message at that time.
Look at Webber up in 5th place as well. He's done well for Jaguar. Started on dry tyres. It's not worked out well for BAR. 9th and 11th. They started on the wets. Ted.
We think that Rubens Barrichello span off on some oil from a support race. David Coulthard had actually radioed back to his team McLaren to tell them there was some oil on that corner. So rather than the wet tyres, it was a bit of oil on the track, and Furman went off on it as well. That's the latest.
Yeah, surprising, unless it was just on the outside and they ran a little wider than the normal line, because obviously we're on lap 10, so we've had 200 passes through that corner and only 2 drivers managed to fall off on it.
Exactly, and if there was oil, it would have been there from one of the support races. That's the corner though, turn 5, where we saw Luciano Berti destroy the Jaguar a couple of years back. It's obviously a very, very tricky corner.
It is, but it wasn't Berti's fault because the car broke. We saw also Zanardi drop it in there. Many new boys have dropped it in that corner because it does entice you to get on with it and go flat out through it, but there's nowhere to go on the exit if you've got it wrong, apart from straight and have a bite out of the wall.
So Renault obviously rolling the dice their way. They've brought Alonso in. Now, I mentioned to you early on that I had pretty good information that Alonso was very, very light on fuel at the start of this Grand Prix, so they obviously knew they were going to have to bring him in pretty soon into the race. He was making fantastic progress before the safety car came out, but slightly difficult to understand why they brought him in now. You see, he could lose track position, well, enormous amount of track position. He's going to go down to 18th place. Safety car coming in at the end of this lap, so the lights will be going off on the top of the safety car. The race director, team will all be telling their drivers that safety car's coming in. Montoya, the absolute master of the restart behind the safety car, he'll be looking to capitalise on this and put some real daylight between himself, not just Trulli in 2nd place, but mainly Ralf Schumacher 3rd, and as you said, Martin, the McLarens that look so menacing at the moment. Raikkonen 5th, Coulthard 7th, and Michael Schumacher down in 6th place in Ferrari. We've expected a bit of a mix-up in the first Grand Prix to the new rules, and we've certainly got it on lap 11.
And this is very much kart or IndyCar territory, why Montoya will be into it so well, because this is what they do over there. They have a, say, yellow period and then have to go with the relatively cold tyres and nail it straight away. It's going to be fascinating now to see Michael Schumacher coming through. He's now running 7th with Alonso's, as you say, somewhat strange pit stop there that's put him 17th. 3 cars currently not running, then D'Amato, Furman and Barrichello, they've all fallen off the road.
Watch Montoya, he's dropping back from the safety car now. Whilst they're following it, they've got to be within 5 car lengths but when he knows the safety car is coming in, he's allowed to slow the pace right down and then drop the throttle whenever he wants to drop the throttle. Everyone else has got to react to his move. This is turn 13, so we've got a couple of corners to go before, and here we go, Montoya picking the pace up now. Now remember, last year we had a safety car, and before they'd even crossed the start-finish line, David Coulthard went off the track. And will the same thing happen here this weekend? Now, that's where Coulthard went off at the top. No one seems to have done it this year, as Montoya flashes across the start-finish line to begin lap 12. He leads the Australian Grand Prix. We're green again here at Melbourne. And Ralf Schumacher's got a good restart, but look at Raikkonen. Makes a move on Webber. Beautiful pass by Kimi Raikkonen.
Yes, Webber realised he'd lost the moment there and quite sensibly gave up, and now Michael Schumacher's going to be past him too as they go down into turn 3. So Webber a little bit overcautious on the restart of this Grand Prix. Schumacher up into 5th place.
Yep, the more experienced driver certainly carving his way through, but Kimi Raikkonen, you'd have to say, is not really much more experienced than Mark Webber, but obviously very motivated, very keen to put right what the mistakes of yesterday, where he hit the wall in the morning and then made a bit of a mess of qualifying. Raikkonen on the move here.
The man who didn't do well on that restart, amazingly, as another IndyCar driver, was Villeneuve. He fell quite a long way back from Coulthard. He's currently in 8th place. Villeneuve then Panis in the Toyota Button. His teammate is in 10th. But at the moment, Montoya leads from Jarno Trulli, who's had a solid afternoon, hasn't he? Ralf Schumacher then, who started back in 9th place, is currently running 3rd, and we have a Williams 1st and 3rd. That's not quite what we expected, is it, after free practice?
No, certainly they were really struggling for pace throughout Friday, and indeed the messages coming out of the camp after the winter testing were that really the car was slower, in fact, than last year's model. Only Williams of the top 3 teams have brought a new car here to Melbourne this weekend. Ferrari, there you can see Michael Schumacher are using last year's car with slightly modified electronics, but apart from that, it was such a good car they didn't really need to do too much to it. They will introduce their new car in Imola, the 4th race of the season, and McLaren also have a modified version of last year's car here. They've done a bit more work to it. Whole new back end, new gearbox, rear suspension, and rear aerodynamics on the McLaren. And that's been a great improvement. They've been a lot faster, as you can see now for yourself. Kimi Raikkonen holding Michael Schumacher behind him at the moment as we ride on board with 3rd place man Ralf Schumacher.
Quickly flashing away. It does seem that Webber's just falling back a little bit from that pack, and behind him is Coulthard and catching them very quickly. Villeneuve, Button, Panis zooming in behind them, who are 8th, 9th and 10th. So that could be quite a good scrap soon. But at the moment, Ralf Schumacher keeping within 0.5 of a second of the Renault of Trulli. Heading down to the far chicane. Let's hope we stay on board and just watch it through this corner. And he does appear to have generally better speed in that Williams BMW.
Well, the information about Trulli is that he was carrying about 50 kilos of fuel at the start of this race, which would get him to about lap 16 or 17. We've had a safety car that might extend it by a lap, but certainly if he can hold on, keep that Williams behind him for that long, he'll be doing very well. This is lap 13. Trulli was certainly figured last year, if you remember, in the early stage of the race. He was up in 2nd place for battling with Montoya then. So once again, the promise of Jarno Trulli again coming through. You can see the rest of the field very close now. Michael Schumacher have a bit of a look at Kimi Raikkonen, a man who he rates very highly. But he's going to have a battle between these two very shortly, I think.
But the first man out there in 5th place who's actually made a pit stop, who's not relying on the fuel that he was given. In fact, Raikkonen did. He came in at the end. But Montoya and Trulli, of course, and Ralf Schumacher are still relying on the fuel they qualified with yesterday. So it won't be that long before they have to come in to a pit stop. And I think that's also, having just pitted, Michael Schumacher quite heavy on fuel, and that's why he's not able to just zoom up behind the other cars. Louise.
Yeah, Rubens Barrichello has made his way back to the paddock now. Rubens, we're hearing reports that there was some oil on the track. Did that contribute to your accident?
I don't know. I mean, my front tires were running into trouble already because the track was quite dry. I had to still pushing. We were talking on the radio because there was the stop and go that I would receive, and all of a sudden I pushed in a little bit too hard into the corner, and there was this understeer. I could never come back.
We were wondering about the stop and go. Did it make you lose your concentration a bit?
Yeah, the problem was that the car started to go, and I put all the power I had it on the brakes, but I couldn't do anything. I mean, the penalty was there because we moved, but it wasn't much of my fault. But then I was just trying to keep on the track and push, lost out.
Thanks, Rubens.
Thank you, Louise. Shame for Rubens Barrichello. Had an impeccable start to the weekend, really very quick on Friday, but it's all gone wrong for him on race day. Juan Montoya, though, the fastest man on the racetrack at the moment on lap 15. He's pushing very hard indeed, a 1:28.692. He's now 4.5 seconds ahead of Jarno Trulli in second place. Third still Ralf Schumacher. Fourth Kimi Raikkonen. Fifth Michael Schumacher. There he is in the Ferrari, closing down on the back of the McLaren. We've got Mark Webber still holding on in sixth place. Seventh Coulthard, and the last of the points-paying positions under the new rules is Jacques Villeneuve. He's back ahead now of his teammate Jenson Button.
That's a very fast lap time from Montoya, just a tenth of last year's fastest race lap, and we know that was a hot pace. So, but he's got to, because he's running out of fuel. He's very low on gas. Montoya surely will have to pit in the next 4 to 5 laps, and we know several of the cars behind him have pitted and will be tanked up, such as Michael Schumacher's Ferrari that you're on. And I am expecting quite a long middle stint with some of these cars. Something like Coulthard, they only fueled it for as long as it took to put the tyres on, so I don't think he had a full hosing down with fuel there on that stop, but Schumacher surely did.
But if you remember, Kimi Raikkonen came in very early into the race. We didn't see how much fuel went into that McLaren. And when he put his dry tyres on, Raikkonen would seem to be a man who's definitely in with a shout of winning this Grand Prix here this afternoon, because he's got the right amount of fuel in the car, probably. He's certainly got the right tyres on. Louise, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm going to ask Ralph Furman what happened. You went off at exactly the same place as Rubens. Was that coincidence or was it his debris?
I'm not sure. I mean, I wasn't pushing 110%. I was still well inside myself, and unfortunately lost the car. But there's been maybe people reports of oil. I didn't see any on the circuit, but we'll have to wait and see till afterwards. But the team did a good job and made the right choice of tyres. But unfortunately, way to end the first Grand Prix.
Unfortunately, being the word, I should think you're gutted, aren't you?
Yeah, we did the right call with the tyres, and I was caught for the first few laps, and it's unfortunate, but
hopefully it'll last a little longer next time. Thanks, Ralph.
thank you very much.
Problem there for Webber then. He's got a right rear suspension failure, I believe. And Webber, yes indeed, look, it's pointing the wrong way, the right rear tyre. And big tank slapper on and just held it, but slips out of 6th place. And that'll be to the great disappointment of the fans here in Melbourne.
Yes, he's certainly got an enormous fan base here this weekend. I'm really impressed with Webber, the way he's been able to keep his head together with all the demands that have been placed on him. You could see him getting more and more tense as the weekend went on. I think he just longed to get into his racing car on Sunday. Here it is again. Yes, you can see
which one it is, but yeah, it's his right rear has come loose, and it's steering the car from the back, and he's having to counter steer with the steering wheel in the opposite direction to that he would normally do, and he's having a look around saying, what on earth was that? But he'll have to go around the other side to see it, which is not that advisable, I would say, from where he's parked.
So Webber becomes the 4th retirement. This is only lap 17 of the Australian Grand Prix. We've lost Cristiano De Matta in the Toyota, who spun out. We've also lost Ralph Furman and Rubens Barrichello, who both crashed at turn 5 within moments of each other. But this is the scrap at the moment on the track between Kimi Raikkonen in 4th place and Michael Schumacher in 5th, with David Coulthard now closing them down in 6th place.
You have to say that although the Ferrari still ended up on the front of the grid, all through free practice and qualifying 1 and up to the end of qualifying 2, it did seem as if most of the teams had closed the gap to Ferrari, didn't they? They didn't appear to have such a big margin. They were flying off the road, Michael in particular. And now look, he's just racing in the pack, although I still believe he's got more fuel on board than the 4 cars in front of him. Still, even last year, I think he would have scythed through those cars.
Yeah, that's for sure. He certainly would have done. But it's interesting to see Michael Schumacher in the middle of the pack. It's been a while since he's been there. And well, he likes a challenge, Michael Schumacher. I remember saying a few years ago he didn't like to lead from the front. Where's the fun in that, he used to say. So we've got Trulli and Ralf Schumacher, 2nd and 3rd place men, both coming in together. This is going to be a pit stop race between Renault and Williams team. There's Montoya. He's also in the pits.
That's going to be busy down at the Williams pit. There's 2 Williams in there. That's not very smart. Ralph's going to have to queue up. Here he comes. They're just going to get him out of the way. The mechanic on the rear, Jack, better realise quickly, and he does. That worked out, Ted.
Well, Martin, it might work out better for them. They are very trained in getting these 2 types of tyres out. I think it's the optimum time for both of them. They were very, very low on fuel anyway. Oh, but is there a problem with Ralf Schumacher's tyre? Yes, there is. There's a problem on the right rear. He seems to be able to get it on now. Now he should be away.
Shaking his head. They won't get it any better, Ralf. 18.2 seconds, a disaster then for Ralf Schumacher in terms of his first pit stop of the 2003 season, nearly wandering over that penalty line and spins. His head is not in the right place.
I think he saw the Renault, the Renault he was racing of Jarno Trulli was right alongside him, and I think he must have just been looking at Trulli and wondering whether he was going to get him into turn 1. And, well, what did you make of that?
I think he was just angry, to be honest. He went out and it's obviously not as grippy up the inside. We've had so many accidents off the start line with support races. There'll be debris and rubbish everywhere, and you're forced up to the inside of turn 1 when you come out of the pits because of the yellow penalty line. And I think Ralf, you know, whenever you see a driver shaking his head, and generally that means his focus is not where it needs to be. And Ralf was angry. And Wilson in the pit, he was 16th. And he has just come into the pits. What are they doing? They're obviously trying to change something inside the right-hand side pod.
Well, this car only made its debut on the 19th of February. They hardly had any running in it at all. Justin Wilson had done just a handful of laps before he got on the plane to Melbourne. And I think Minardi, in the back of their minds, kind of expected something like this. So this is lap 18. Kimi Raikkonen is leading the Grand Prix from Michael Schumacher, who's just under a second behind him. David Coulthard is 3rd. Villeneuve is 4th, Button 5th, 6th is Panis, 7th Montoya, and there's a look at, as I was saying, it was the Renault that Ralf Schumacher was racing for position right alongside him, and Alonso there forced to run wide onto the grass. So a bit of a messy episode there, but what a prospect. This is lap 18. Raikkonen and Michael Schumacher are at the front of the pack, and a scrap for sure is likely to ensure. Safety car is on the track. Of the Australian Grand Prix, the tantalising prospect of Kimi Raikkonen in the McLaren and Michael Schumacher in the Ferrari at the front of the grid. We're under a safety car at the moment, the second safety car of the race. It's been a highly eventful Grand Prix for those of you just joining us. Right from the start, we've had incidents and accidents, we've had enormous amount of overtaking. The conditions haven't really changed, it's just got steadily drier and drier. It's the last time it rained was about, well, 2 hours ago, a good hour and a bit before the race started anyway. It was the last time we had any rain. So the track drying out. Some people gambled on dry tyres at the start, some went on wets. At the moment, the people who are really in the box seats are the ones who refuelled earlier on and were on the dry tyres. There's Justin Wilson, debutant, British driver in the Minardi. He was in 18th place, but he's been in the pits now for a couple of laps.
Well, luckily for them, it's under safety car conditions, so they're losing much less time than they would normally. They're lapping around 2 minutes 31 instead of 1 minute 31 as they're behind the safety car, and the pack going past one more time for Justin Wilson. But they must get back on the track. There are only 15 runners at the moment. He will make the 16th. They've still got a chance of some points this afternoon. Verstappen, his teammate, up in 11th. Louise.
Yeah, down in the back of the Minardi garage at the moment. The reason he's come in is because the team noticed a rise in the engine water temperatures. So they brought him in. They're hoping it was a blocked radiator. There's been a lot of frantic activity going on. So the guys are hoping to get him out again. They're going to refuel him and change his tyres whilst he's in as well. So I'll keep you updated.
And that's the importance of car-to-pit telemetry, so that the teams can at least read what's going on out there, because I think reliability is going to be a key issue through the 2003 season. And of course the safety car then is in this lap. It was put out to recover that stricken Jaguar of Mark Webber, and you certainly wouldn't have... I was surprised Webber was busy looking around his car to see what was the problem with it. Michael Schumacher just puffing his front tyres, locking them up, trying to get some heat back into those discs, but they were not prepared to put marshals out into the zone where Webber's car had stopped, and I don't blame them.
On board with Michael Schumacher, the sole remaining Ferrari in this Grand Prix. Rubens Barrichello crashed out earlier on, and we're getting ready for the restart now. That's Kimi Raikkonen up front.
Did you see the wobble on the front left-hand tyre of Michael Schumacher's car? If you saw that, it tells you two things. Firstly, they're generally running very, very low tyre pressures. Could be down 16 or 17 psi, but in these conditions, on a cold day, behind a safety car running a minute off the pace, they could be down to 10 or 11 psi at the moment, and that is going to give him such a handful when he starts the race, and also the car will tend to bottom out as well, and that is why he's wrestling the steering wheel, desperately trying to generate some heat and therefore some pressure back into those front tyres.
Yes, because the first corner here is a fairly immense braking, isn't it? Down into turn one, and it's very, very easy to get it wrong, as we've seen throughout qualifying. This is going to be a big test though for Kimi Raikkonen. It's the first time he's led a Grand Prix at the restart behind a safety car, and a very inexperienced driver. It's only his third season of car racing. He's nailed the throttle now and left Michael Schumacher behind, but be careful, Kimi, because David Coulthard went off on that corner at the restart last year. Raikkonen doesn't make the same mistake. A great restart for Kimi Raikkonen.
And Michael Schumacher, and especially Coulthard. But look, once again Villeneuve caught napping there in the first of the two PARs in fourth place, but Button does not have a chance to look up the inside of his teammate, locks his front wheels and somehow didn't run into the back of him, and Montoya will be pleased with that safety car. He had to pit. He was still relying on his qualifying fuel, the fuel that was locked off yesterday afternoon, and he had to start the race with that. And Montoya then, because of the safety car situation, and now he makes the move, and it enabled him to stay in touch with the leading pack despite that pit stop.
What did you make of that restart from Raikkonen? I mean, it made it look easy, didn't he? But the pressure must have been immense.
Well, he's led a Grand Prix before, of course, in Manicourt last year, and shows a very calm head on the young man, doesn't it? But yeah, he certainly got away well, did it absolutely spot on.
So, lap 21, Kimi Raikkonen leads by just over a second from Michael Schumacher. David Coulthard, half a second behind the German. Villeneuve fourth still. Button right on his gearbox, a teammate, and there's no love lost between those two, as we've been finding out over the last few weeks. Olivier Panis is sixth, Montoya seventh. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who had a very eventful start along with his teammate, Sauber teammate Nick Heidfeld, he's back down to 8th now. Fisichella up to 9th in the Jordan. That's the first we've really heard of him throughout this Grand Prix.
You see, it says that on the statistics that Raikkonen hasn't made a pit stop, and look, Heidfeld out of the Grand Prix. He was running down in 13th place, unlucky for some and definitely unlucky for him today. Where will he be parked, and will they need a safety car again? He'll select neutral so they can press the button, select the neutral so they can push the car away. But Raikkonen did of course come in at the end of the green flag lap, and it looks like Heidfeld is right in the... What on earth is that all about? And so nearly in pushes Ralf Schumacher, who's having a mere of an afternoon. He has to go right around the gravel trap down there in turn one. I don't know what happened there. No, it's over there at the chicane, turn 12 and 13. Ralf did very well. Look, the right front tyre's not on properly. Right front wheel not on properly for Nick Heidfeld.
Yeah, it certainly looks as though something wrong with his front suspension there. But Ralf Schumacher's had a terrible weekend. He had an awful time in qualifying on Friday and again on Saturday. And then today, well, he's had a very, very long pit stop when a right rear wheel wouldn't go on properly, the wheel nut wouldn't engage, and now he's very nearly been taken off the track by Nick Heidfeld. They want to forget this year's Australian Grand Prix in a hurry. A race she's been on the podium in the past.
I was saying to you, it doesn't show Raikkonen as having pitted. He did pit at the end of the formation lap, so the Grand Prix hadn't started. That's why he didn't register. But we don't know if they put any fuel in Raikkonen's car. You've got to assume they put in quite a lot. Well snaky there into turn 15.
Raikkonen did a 1:29.1. In fact, Michael Schumacher's last lap was very quick. Raikkonen seems to be struggling a little bit with his tyres, doesn't he, Martin?
Yeah, he does. It's very easy to lock. I think there's a different philosophy of how they make the Michelins, which gives them great traction. But also, I think the fronts tend to lock up a little bit easier than the Bridgestones from just watching the cars over the last couple of years. And Raikkonen looking very ragged, it has to be said. We think from the F1 ITV pit crew, they put a good 50 kilos of fuel in that car. And that means then he's still got a long way to go before he needs another pit stop. Decent lap times, but suddenly Michael Schumacher looking very menacing.
Yes, indeed. I was just saying, Michael Schumacher's last lap was very competitive, a 1:28.394. He took a full 0.8 of a second out of Kimi Raikkonen, and that's what put him right on his gearbox. Fantastic onboard pictures then from a 5-time world champion.
Very calm on the wheel, isn't he, Michael? And you can afford to be when the car works so well. When I drove that Ferrari, the 2000 Ferrari, it just amazed me how stable the car was, and it does give you supreme confidence, and it just takes away all the ugly stuff under braking and turn into a corner and allows you to place the car much better. But good drive out of the last corner then for Raikkonen, and Coulthard really pushing hard in the background too to stay in touch. He's in third, and Coulthard then the fastest man on the track. He took a half a second out of the leaders, so he's coming up to speed nicely and still pulling away from Villeneuve fourth, Button fifth, Montoya sixth, Panis seventh in the Toyota, and Frentzen in the one and only Sauber remaining now in 8th place. We have, it seems, 14 runners at the moment. No sign of Justin Wilson returning to the racetrack.
We also have a very exciting motor race on our hands, and has been so for the last 24 laps. Who would have predicted this, with an all-Ferrari front row on the grid, and with McLaren's down in 11th in the case of Coulthard, and 15th Raikkonen on the start line. Who would have predicted that we would be in this kind of situation 24 laps into the Australian Grand Prix? One thing's for sure, these two BAR drivers have really been egging each other on throughout the weekend. It's been terrific to watch. Jenson Button put in a terrific qualifying lap on Friday, and Jacques Villeneuve had to go out and beat it, and they've just been egging each other on. It's been fantastic, and throughout this race they've been exchanging positions. At the moment, Villeneuve is in front of his English teammate.
And the two Honda engines looking very strong and very reliable too in the back of those BARs. They had a bad batch early on in the weekend, but now it appears to be working well. Look how much tighter line Schumacher could take in that hairpin to give him a much better look at the final corner, and that it just keeps adding up. You take a tighter line, you get on the throttle earlier, you get a wider turn in, you reduce the angle of the corner, and that just keeps helping you all the way along.
Well, this is something that we're expecting to see quite a lot of in 2003. Kimi Raikkonen and Michael Schumacher, with David Coulthard also in attendance. Raikkonen's been here before, French Grand Prix last year at Magny-Cours, where he led for quite a few laps and then had the misfortune to be the first on the scene of a Toyota engine blow-up. Oil on the track, Raikkonen got caught in it, didn't see it, and ran a little wide. Michael Schumacher came down the inside, put a really rather brutal chop on him as he went through. But I think Michael learned something about Kimi that day, and you've both got mental pictures of each other, I should imagine, Martin, now, about what they're likely to do in this sort of situation.
Yeah, you have to say Schumacher looks the calmer. It's déjà vu, as they say, from last year's French Grand Prix. Just 2.5 seconds then between the first 3 cars. And Villeneuve now some 5 seconds behind Coulthard in 4th. And look how stable the Ferrari is. He doesn't have to correct the car on the exit of the corner at all. He's merely just turning it in, the right amount of steering lock.
It's Wilson. They're trying to get the car started again. His teammate, incidentally, Jos Verstappen, who we saw starting from the pit lane in the second of the Minardi Cosworths. He's currently running in 11th place, just behind Jarno Trulli. So the car obviously going quite quickly this weekend. It's just a bit of a shame for Justin Wilson that his has been a little unreliable. Michael Schumacher, though, getting a little bit closer to Kimi Räikkönen now.
Schumacher's much quicker under braking. Watch down into turn 3. Sorry, we cut away. Button then is, in fact, the two BARs following each other in. I wonder if they're taking the same strategy as Williams, and it doesn't work. You need a bit of a separation between your two cars for that to work. Obviously, you want to max out the number of laps you can do after your qualifying run where the fuel is sealed off, but you need a good 15 seconds, at least 12 between your two cars for that to pay off, and Button lost out very badly there.
Yes, he lost at least 10 seconds out of his race time. He's struggling to get the car going again. I imagine there's a great deal of frustration inside that helmet of Jenson Button, because he was sitting right on the tail of Jacques Villeneuve. He looked very, very comfortable on the pace of his teammate, but right there he's just seen 10 seconds of his race effort disappear, and goodness knows how many racing positions. We'll find out in a moment when the computer sorts out the race order. We'll tell you exactly how many places he's lost as Schumacher closes up once again on the back of Kimi Räikkönen.
Yes, unless you know you're going to have separation between your two cars in a Grand Prix, you cannot possibly, with one pit crew, Michael getting that all wrong, you cannot possibly schedule them to stop on the same lap. That surely was a mistake on the BAR pit wall, and still then, sadly, Justin Wilson not able to rejoin the Grand Prix.
A lot of frustrations up and down the pit lane here today. The debutants having a bit of a tough start. De Matter into the sand trap. Ralph Furman has crashed, and now it seems Justin Wilson isn't going to get any more laps in this Grand Prix. Only then Antonio Pizzonia of the first-time drivers still going. He's in 10th place in the sole remaining Jaguar.
You know what's great? I've no idea who's going to win this Grand Prix, because Montoya, looking 4th place, has refueled recently and now just 12 seconds adrift. Michael Schumacher lost out heavily last time around to both McLarens, and he's now on an absolute sprinter of a first sector, a full 2-3 tenths quicker than Räikkönen. That's why he's suddenly back on his gearbox again. Schumacher responding to those two cars around him, in front, one behind, suddenly putting a bit of a sprint on. The McLaren's working well, and Michael Schumacher having to respond, and this is going to be the fastest lap of the race. I think it's going to be a new lap record. You can see the vortices were coming off the rear wing of that McLaren. There's a bit of moisture in the air. Formula 1 cars love this. The cold air goes in, the charge is denser, they can put a bit more fuel in, you get more power, the tyres are working nicely. It's really good to be driving a Grand Prix car in these slightly cool, slightly damp conditions. Schumacher coming over the line now. What time does he do? It's a 1:27.7. That is a new lap record, and look, right up behind Räikkönen now.
We just got a glimpse of Nick Heidfeld, the Sauber driver, walking in. Had a really electric start to this Grand Prix, but a rather disappointing conclusion. We're being told from race control an incident involving car number 20 is under investigation by the stewards. That's Olivier Panis, and that's bad news for the Toyota driver, because he's currently lying in 5th place. Louise.
Still down at the Minardi garage. They haven't given up yet. They'll get points for perseverance if nothing else. They are going to try and get Justin back out on the track. Obviously any hope of a really good result has now gone away, but I think the team would like to get information about this car. You said earlier on they haven't done much testing, but it seems to be going away from him, unfortunately.
That perseverance was always a quick driver, but not if his car won't work. Räikkönen then just 0.3 of a second ahead of Michael Schumacher. Coulthard's dropped off behind them now. He's 3.2 behind them, and he's now putting on a bit of a sprint. It's a real yo-yo going on amongst the top 3, as meanwhile Montoya now 9.8 seconds behind the leading trio. Panis 5th, Frentzen 6th, Fisichella 7th, Trulli 8th, Verstappen in the Minardi, Verstappen 9, Pizzonia in the Jaguar 10, Mark Webber's out of it, his teammate. Alonso 11th, Ralf Schumacher 12th, Villeneuve and Button down in 13th and 14th after that crazy pit stop.
Yeah, they dropped 6 places as a result of that. Michael Schumacher just having another look down the inside of Kimi Räikkönen. Well, there were long faces yesterday afternoon after qualifying as we look at Schumacher. Lovely sideways shot from his mirror. See how he sits down in the car under braking. The long faces at McLaren yesterday were enormously frustrated by this single shot qualifying, this new innovation, simply because both drivers didn't get the best out of their laps. Kimi Raikkonen made a mistake and had a deflating tyre as a result of it towards the end of his lap, which dropped him down to 15th on the grid. They really felt they should have been up in the top 6, but it hasn't really mattered come race day. An inspired move by Ron Dennis and his men to bring Kimi Raikkonen in for fuel and tyres before the Grand Prix even started, when it was clear that the track was drying out. We've got beautiful sunshine here now at Melbourne, and that has put Raikkonen right up front.
Yeah, but you could always rely on changeable conditions to give you an unusual and unpredictable Grand Prix. It's always the best way. Maybe the new rule should just be they should randomly water a couple of corners and not tell the drivers till they go round on the outlap or something.
Or have Grand Prix in Manchester, where it rains pretty regularly. Anyway, Ferrari are out in the pit lane, so Michael Schumacher is going to be the first of these two to stop. It may be because Ferrari think that Michael is faster. We've seen him set the fastest lap of the race so far, and by putting him out of sequence here, hoping to capitalise a little later on. Very relaxed down there in the Ferrari pit as they wait for their man, just glancing up at the corporate guests who are glaring down at them from the boxes.
Michael wiping his visor there, obviously getting a bit of oil out of the back of the McLaren. Ted?
It's undoubtedly the case, Martin, that Michael is being brought in because he can go quicker when he comes out. I'm quite surprised, actually, that McLaren aren't bringing Kimi Raikkonen in as well. They might have fancied their chances with a head-to-head with the mechanics. Maybe what do you think?
I wonder, because they were going to so much trouble to clean out the side pods of the Ferrari there. Oh, Michael nearly crossed the yellow line. We've already seen Panis is about to have a drive-through penalty for crossing that yellow penalty line. But I wonder if the car was just getting a little bit warm. They were certainly prepared to give up some track time there and spend extra time cleaning out the side pods.
I think part of the tactic also from Ferrari was to try and get Michael Schumacher out in the gap which existed between Montoya and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Didn't quite work out for them, and Schumacher now has Frentzen and Fisichella in front of him he's got to deal with. Meanwhile, Raikkonen at the front, no one in front of him. He's now set the fastest first two sectors of the race he's done so far, so he's responding to Michael Schumacher. He knows exactly what's going on because of the radio communication from the pits, and Raikkonen pushing extremely hard on lap 30. He is 3.4 seconds ahead of his own teammate David Coulthard. It's going back a few years now since we had a McLaren 1-2 at Melbourne. Long way to go yet though. Montoya third, Frentzen fourth, fifth is Fisichella, sixth Michael Schumacher, seventh Jarno Trulli, and eighth, but about to make a stop and go penalty, Olivier Panis. Lap 32 of the Australian Grand Prix. That's Antonio Pizzonia, who's in a little bit of trouble in the Jaguar. He's just had a spin and he's now in front of Jenson Button, who lost an enormous amount of time due to a very, very badly worked pit stop by the BAR team. They brought both Villeneuve and Button in at the same time. So Jensen had to sit there doing absolutely nothing for about 12 seconds while they refueled Villeneuve. Both of those two cars have now dropped right down to 13th and 14th places. Louise, what can you tell us?
Well, I've just been to ask the team about that. What they told me is that Jacques Villeneuve was losing his radio signal. They did actually call him into the pits on several occasions. He was due to come in before Jensen. But Villeneuve didn't hear the call, so they switched the strategy and said, OK, we'll bring Jensen in instead. Just as Jensen was coming in, Villeneuve heard the call and decided to, it's time for him to come in as well. So that's what the team have told me. Adds an interesting dimension to that rivalry we've been hearing so much about, though.
Something wrong here, Martin?
Yeah, Verstappen not happy, is there, sitting as he stalled the engine. No, he obviously hasn't, but he hasn't got any gears. Box full of neutrals then. Now he's found one, and off he goes. And McLaren, we think, are ready for Coulthard to come in. We know they've given the push board to Kimi Raikkonen, and push he has. He's now got a 5-second advantage over Coulthard as he sets yet another new fastest lap of the race. And Coulthard in this time.
And it's an important stop for McLaren because they want to get Coulthard out in front of Michael Schumacher. That's the target, I believe, because Schumacher is 31 seconds behind Raikkonen and 26 seconds behind Coulthard. So this should get him out in front of the Ferrari, and that tactically, certainly from Kimi Raikkonen's point of view, is massively important. Montoya up into second place. Reasonable stop. There's quite a lot of fuel going into that car.
A lot of fuel. It was a good stop, but a lot of fuel. But what's showing up very well here is just what a good move it was for them to fuel Raikkonen up before the start of the race. He really was carrying a lot of petrol, and it's enabled him to go a long way. And what's even more interesting for me, James, is that quite clearly Raikkonen's car is heavier than Schumacher's was when Schumacher was sort of staying with him and pushing him a little bit. But the Raikkonen in this McLaren has got some serious pace this afternoon. Coming in at the end of this lap, we believe.
Yes, he has driven that car with quite a lot of fuel on board. It's clear now at the start of the race and been able to find speed. We think that Michael Schumacher is behind David Coulthard, so it would appear to have worked for the McLaren team, that strategy of bringing Coulthard in, as Raikkonen, the race leader, dives into the pit lane. Now he's got Montoya 19.4 seconds behind him. That's the man he's got to worry about.
Panis is dropping out of the race. He's stopped around the circuit, so 13 runners now then. Panis in the Toyota falling away. And into the box then with Raikkonen. Some 22 men involved in making this work out. How much fuel will they give him? You've got to assume it'll be roughly the same as they're giving Coulthard. Looked a touch shorter, if anything, didn't it? No, in fact, it was 7/10 longer. So that, again, worked very well for the team.
It was a very tasty stop indeed by the McLaren team. Raikkonen really punched it out of the box. There's Michael Schumacher. So the tactics definitely worked. And the pit stop sequence has gone through. They've both, well, certainly Raikkonen and Coulthard are fueled to go to the finish. No doubt about that, judging by the amount of time it took to put fuel in the car. And you can see Kimi Raikkonen, he'll be delighted to see that Heinz-Harald Frentzen is between him and Michael Schumacher. Juan Montoya is leading the race at the moment as Fisichella makes a pit stop on lap 34. Raikkonen is second, Frentzen is third, Michael Schumacher fourth, Coulthard fifth, Trulli sixth. But the men who are looking really strong at the moment are the McLaren men.
Yes, indeed. Montoya pitted then back on lap 16. So we're now on lap 33. So Montoya getting quite a long way through his fuel as Fisichella joins the racetrack in 10th place, it would seem. I would have imagined now, with so much fuel going in those McLarens, you've got to expect that Michael Schumacher should cruise quite quickly up behind Raikkonen. If he doesn't, we'll know for sure the McLaren really does have more pace this afternoon.
Yes, and also possibly that the Ferrari is carrying still a reasonable amount of fuel. Can Michael Schumacher, he surely has to stop again this afternoon. Well, it's all going to play out. Certainly pushing very hard, the world champion, on lap 35 of this 58 lap Australian Grand Prix. And it's been another really stellar afternoon for young Kimi Raikkonen, 23 years of age, from Espoo in Finland, the same hometown as JJ Leto, who raced in Formula One back in the early 1990s, town just outside Helsinki. And Raikkonen, the son of a quarryman, a guy who drives a lorry in a big quarry just outside Helsinki. He doesn't do that anymore. Kimi's bought him and his mother a very nice house, pays for his brother's rallying program, very much looking after the family now that he's in the money. as a top Grand Prix driver, and he's looking very comfortable here this afternoon with Michael Schumacher, Juan Montoya and David Coulthard all putting him under a lot of pressure. Montoya leading, but he has to stop again. Raikkonen second, Frentzen third, Michael Schumacher fourth, Coulthard fifth and Trulli sixth.
It's Frentzen there in third place, but he also has to stop. He's a little bit out of sync really with his stops, but still travelling pretty quickly and looking a solid bet for some points this afternoon. I wonder just where Montoya's going to end up after his next, what will be a relatively short stop. Don't discount Montoya totally yet, but it does appear to be a fight between, actually most likely at the moment, Raikkonen and Michael Schumacher to win this Grand Prix.
Well, you take about 19 seconds out of your race, plus however long you're stationary for in your pit stop in order to make a stop. At the moment, Montoya, he'd be looking at rejoining about 5th or 6th after his pit stop, possibly. But it just depends really at the moment how far away that pit stop is.
Michael Schumacher just 0.3 of a second faster, and I'm sure he's got a lighter fuel load at this stage, and having a look to try and get past fellow countryman Frentzen, but that's for position, and Frentzen does not have to get out of the way, even though his Ferrari engine supplier might wish that he would.
Well, we know that Schumacher's capable of laps in the very low 1 minute 28 or even faster. At the moment, Frentzen is penning him to very high 28s or even low 29s, and this is good news for both Montoya and Raikkonen in front of him, because at the moment Frentzen, although he's got a very light fuel load on that Sauber, and it's only a matter of time before he makes a pit stop, at the moment Schumacher just doesn't seem to be able to get past him.
No, and Raikkonen's not had a good lap. He's made a mistake somewhere in the first sector, and that is why the Ferrari, despite being tucked up behind the Sauber, is that much closer to him.
One of the reasons, Martin, why Schumacher will find it difficult to get past Frentzen is because they've got the same engine. The Sauber customers of Ferrari using the engine from last year's 2002 Ferrari, which is pretty much the same one that Michael's using here, and the same gearbox. So an unusual situation this, and certainly any suggestions that as Frentzen dives into the pits, and that's what Schumacher needs, he's released.
He certainly is. That's rather convenient that Frentzen pitted at that time, because that was going to suddenly, that was very much playing into McLaren's hands, that he was tucked up behind Frentzen, and got to remember who supplies their engine and gearbox. But no, maybe he just needed a fuel stop, and I'm coming up with ideas there. But anyway, it's worked out very well for Michael Schumacher. He can now get after Raikkonen again.
Incident involving car number 6 under investigation by the stewards.
Raikkonen.
That's Kimi Raikkonen, so whatever, maybe there was something to do with what made him go slow on that lap.
Or he crossed the yellow line on the way out of the pits. We'll have to wait and see, but there we are. That must be Michael Schumacher, of course, because Barrichello has visited the wall and is out of the Grand Prix. And suddenly, Raikkonen struggling a little bit. He did a 31.1 last time around, a very slow lap time. Is Kimi Raikkonen developing some kind of mechanical problem in that McLaren, or a handling imbalance, because he's very, very slow at the moment?
Yeah, that's a lot of time to give away, and you can see that the Ferrari is voraciously eating away at the distance between the two cars. Listening out, can you hear anything? I'm
just listening. The engine sounds like it's on 10 cylinders, and there sounds like a full complement of gears in the cog box. So very, very hesitant on the throttle, Kimi Raikkonen. Maybe it's just a balance problem. Maybe his tyre pressures are out. He's lost engine power. Look, he's lost engine power because he's really having to defend his line. I'll be amazed if Michael can get through there. There's not a lot of space, is there? And that was excellent driving from Raikkonen, if a touch rude.
I bet Michael Schumacher wasn't expecting that. Well, we've heard a lot about Kimi Raikkonen, huge expectations on his shoulders. Quite a tough character. In his first season with Sauber, he put Ricardo Zonta in a very, very difficult position in Canada, and he did it again to Michael Schumacher here. Well, check this out.
Nothing wrong with it. You're allowed to make one move across the racetrack. He's on the inside line, and he does not have to let Michael Schumacher just pass him and go through the corner. He's perfectly entitled to squeeze him and use the energy and forces. But unfortunately for Raikkonen, he has a drive-through penalty. He has to come in the pit lane, go through at 80 kilometers per hour, 50 miles an hour, and that will cost him badly. It will probably put him behind Montoya So the luck of Michael Schumacher is about to take the lead.
Yeah, almost certainly will cost Raikkonen the race. Very difficult to see how he'll be able to recover that. It'll take about 15 seconds out of his race time, and that'll, well, you can see what that will do to the relationship between him and Schumacher on the track. Don't forget, Montoya still 14 seconds ahead of Raikkonen on the racetrack, but we believe he has another stop to make. And as you say, Martin, frustration down at McLaren, I would think, and elation in the cockpit of Michael Schumacher's Ferrari. The guy just, whatever he does, it just turns to gold, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He is the luckiest guy in Formula One.
But at the same time, Raikkonen's still not that fast for some reason, and I still believe he's developing a bit of a gremlin somewhere. His penalty is for speeding in the pit lane. Suspect he didn't get the car slowed down enough on the way in, or get the button pressed early enough, and that is a crucial mistake by a driver, something you shouldn't be doing these days, but it was for speeding and not crossing the penalty line at all.
Well, Michael Schumacher will be aware, the team will have told him that the McLaren driver has to come in for a stop, so he will be aware of that. He will not be looking to make any attack on Kimi Raikkonen, and Raikkonen's pace at the moment dropping off slightly, 0.4 of a second in the first lap. He could do his teammate Coulthard a favour here, couldn't he, Raikkonen, by just holding Michael up a little bit.
He's got to come in within 3 laps to serve that penalty, and you're not allowed to stay out there all afternoon and do it right at the end. But Coulthard's not fast either. You know what I think's happening? I think they're going through that zone with the Michelins where they put a lot of fuel in, and the Michelins dip and then come back again. We've seen it so often with them, because both McLarens really are off the pace at the moment, and meanwhile Montoya is absolutely flying up front in the 1 minute 27s, while then Raikkonen goes in then to serve his penalty, and Michael Schumacher, the road opens up in front of him, and he moves actually into second place. He doesn't lead the Grand Prix at the moment, but Montoya, we surely know, has to stop again.
Yeah, but Michael Schumacher lost 4 seconds in that little period of time there behind Raikkonen. He's now 17.5 seconds behind Montoya. He was just 13.5 behind a couple of laps ago. Ted, what can you tell us?
James, I think it's a disaster for Raikkonen. I think he's going to end up down in 8th. Where is he? Behind the 2 Renaults now. It was such a contrast of moods at McLaren. At one moment, they were punching the air after his defence of that place from Schumacher. Then heads dropped after he was given that drive-through. Tough luck.
Yes, and it's even worse than that, Ted. As you said, he's behind the 2 Renaults and the Minardi of Verstappen, and he's now got to clear them, so he'll lose even more time. We'll be back shortly.
...17 laps to go in this thrilling Australian Grand Prix from Melbourne. Juan Montoya leads from Michael Schumacher by 17.8 seconds. And 3rd place Coulthard, 4th Alonso, 5th his Renault teammate Jarno Trulli, 6th is the Williams of Ralf Schumacher. And Kimi Raikkonen, the man in your screens at the moment, who is closing in on the back of Jos Verstappen in the European Minardi. He is the man to keep an eye on, because he was in 2nd place, but he had to do a drive-through penalty just a couple of laps ago, and that has dropped him down into 7th place, now 42 seconds behind Montoya. And with Michael Schumacher 17 seconds behind Montoya, it doesn't need a rocket scientist to work out that Raikkonen's got his work cut out.
Montoya's pushing very hard. No doubt Michael Schumacher's been given the push signal as well, because he was going very fast and actually ran off the road briefly, did Michael Schumacher, through the fast chicane, turns 11 and 12. He knows he's got to close this gap. Michael Schumacher getting held up behind Kimi Räikkönen, as you pointed out, James, cost him 4 seconds, and it's pulled Montoya right back into the frame. Montoya definitely back in the frame here this afternoon. His teammate Ralf Schumacher is pitting as we speak. He's down in 7th place. There he is now.
So Williams bringing Ralf Schumacher in first. They want to make sure that the decks are well and truly clear before they bring the race leader in, because that will be an absolutely crucial stop for Montoya. And the further we go into this race, the shorter his pit stop will be, because he needs to take on less fuel. We've only got 17 laps to go to the finish. So if Montoya can just eke out a couple more, he can make quite a quick stop. And he's going to come in next lap, we're being told by our ITV F1 pit crew. So it's going to be pretty close with Michael Schumacher, but he should certainly get out in front of David Coulthard. And that's Ralf Schumacher, who's rejoined down in 8th place.
Sadly, Justin Wilson and fellow new boy Brit Ralph Furman both out of the Grand Prix. Furman went off in turn 5. Wilson had technical problems, and race leader Montoya in then. He was 18.4 seconds ahead last time around. You've got to assume, and Michael Schumacher has passed, so he is now behind Schumacher. And where is David Coulthard? He will get out, I believe, in front of David Coulthard. But has Michael Schumacher got a stop yet for a splash and dash before the end of the Grand Prix? I keep looking at the numbers here, James, and I can't be sure Schumacher's got enough fuel in that Ferrari to get to the end.
Well, it really depends entirely on how much he had in it at the start, because he stopped for 10.6 seconds on lap 7 and for 9 seconds on lap 29. So if he had a fair bit of fuel in at the start, he may well be able to go to the finish.
There's a secondary factor, the two pace cars, where they only use about a third as much fuel per lap behind the pace cars they do under hot laps, and that of course extends your range of your fuel tank.
There's a replay there of that is Räikkönen just running wide, and presumably a lot of frustration in that young man after the position he was in, and he sped in the pit lane and for that got a drive-through penalty. But just to show you that they're all capable of doing it, Michael Schumacher looks like he's damaged his floor, Martin. We saw him run wide a few laps ago, and I wonder whether that's part of his floor trailing. Anyway, this is a lovely front wing shot from one of the two Williams. Difficult to tell which one it is. Possibly Montoya, who's currently in 2nd place. Either way, the car travelling yes, it is, very rapidly indeed. And what's been interesting this afternoon, Martin, has been the relative pace of the Williams and the McLaren versus the Ferrari. Certainly, Ferrari was surprised yesterday to have a 1 second margin in qualifying over Montoya. And it seems that really Williams and McLaren have closed the gap on this 2002 Ferrari.
Yeah, that's working well. It's a great shot, isn't it, from these new camera angles we have for 2003. And just to see how well that Williams is working today. He did come out of the pits in front of David Coulthard. Coulthard, though, just 3 seconds behind him, and the pair of them are 14 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. We think Coulthard can go to the end. We know Montoya can go to the end without refueling. What about Michael Schumacher? Not getting a lot of help there from Pitzonia, who he's trying to lap. Michael Schumacher leads from Montoya. Coulthard, truly, Räikkönen up to 5th place despite flying off the road, and that's because Alonso pitted for fuel. 6th is Frentzen, 7th Alonso, Ralf Schumacher 8th, Fisichella, Villeneuve and Button. BAR somehow or other thrown it away with pit strategy and problems. Pitzonia and Verstappen, your 13th and final runner.
So Ferrari chasing their 160th Grand Prix victory here this afternoon. And, whoa, that's part of the barge board. They carry on losing bits of the car. Now he seemed to be struggling there, Martin.
It's looking like a Meccano set that hasn't been put together properly. Bits falling off it left, right and centre. He did bump down the grass. He might get black flag for that. He might well get black flag. He's got bits hanging off both sides of it, and that will seriously affect the handling of that Ferrari. So if Montoya and Coulthard will certainly be alerted to that, they've got to push all the way to the end of the Grand Prix, because that Ferrari is beatable.
Well, looking at it now, you'd have to say it is. This is the 2002 Ferrari. They haven't brought the new car out yet. We'll see that probably in April. We're told it's about 0.6 of a second a lap faster, but look at the fight Schumacher's having.
And how did that come off? It just fell off of its own accord, didn't it? I don't really... Yes, it did. That's strange. I mean, he bumped along the grass, but it was just with the two left-hand side wheels. Maybe he's been off the road at some other point, unseen by the TV camera. But that's very unusual for that to happen. And it's just held on by a little guy rope at the back, which is even worse than it falling off altogether.
A little bit of anxiety then in the Ferrari garage, and we cast our minds back a few years to the Malaysian Grand Prix, where Ferrari had a barge board infringement. Barge boards became very much the talk, really, over that period of time. Almost cost them a world championship because they weren't in compliance with the rules. But here today, it's a loose barge board that's causing Ferrari headaches. 14 laps to go. Is it going to detach itself, or is he going to get black flagged? The rules of the sport say that if you've got bits of your bodywork hanging off, the race director can call you in a black flag, call you into the pits because you are a danger to other competitors. And you consider him a danger to other competitors?
He looks a danger to himself at the moment. He's really fighting that car. That's both barge boards gone. I think what's trailing under the other side is the remains of the left-hand side barge board, and that piece of carbon fibre controls the air very dramatically and divides it between that air that must go through the radiators. There's no fans on these cars, the air's driven through them, and the rest of the air that goes over the back of the car. And that's why Michael Schumacher and Ferrari are getting ready in the pit lane. They'll have to just cut that off and send him out again, but he'll still be struggling for handling.
He will indeed. Jarno Trulli pits from 5th place, but what will a Schumacher pit stop, albeit perhaps only one just to rip a piece of bodywork off, do? I tell you what, Martin, I can see the refueler. The Ferrari refueler is there, so he did possibly have to make another fuel stop as it was. We thought he might well do, so it's not just going to be about ripping that barge board off, and this is great news for Juan Montoya.
Car 1 has had the black and orange flag. That means you've got damage to your car, you've got a problem with your car, you must call in at the pit. You can stop at your own pit. It's not a flag where you have to stop and see the clerk of the course. But Michael Schumacher will fall back into 3rd place because Montoya is only 13 seconds behind him. Coulthard 2.3 behind Montoya. Now it's turning into a straight fight between Montoya and Coulthard. Raikkonen is 4th. I think Schumacher will come out in front of Raikkonen as long as they don't have too much drama cutting that. Has it fallen off by its own accord now, or is it still hanging in there somewhere? Ted, what can you see?
Martin, the barge board has actually come off, so he did have to make another fuel stop. The fuel goes in. This is fantastic news for Williams and for McLaren. New tyres go on. Nigel Stepney taking a good old look at it just to make sure it's roadworthy. But how is this? Is this a Ferrari making a bit of a duff-up of strategy?
And Raikkonen might go through past him. He's done with pit straight now. Michael Schumacher can see him. There is Kimi Raikkonen, who goes up into 3rd place. Montoya leads the Australian Grand Prix. This is lap 47 of 58, and we've got real drama here. Well, I said at the start of this race, you've got to go back to September 2001 for the last time that somebody other than this man led the Formula One World Championship. Could we see something different here today? He's chasing his 4th consecutive Australian Grand Prix, but he's really up against it now with 12 laps to go. Montoya's ahead. 2.4 seconds behind him is David Coulthard, and then Kimi Raikkonen and Michael Schumacher are close together.
Yes. Raikkonen is ahead of Schumacher, as you can see, but Schumacher doesn't have the car underneath him. They're critical parts of the aero package of a Formula One car, and I don't see how Michael will really be able to put a challenge on to even to Raikkonen, let alone Coulthard and Montoya. So it's turning out, we said keep an eye on Montoya, didn't we? But it's really playing into his hands nicely with that extra pit stop of Michael's. Michael stopped last on lap 29 just for 9 seconds. I think they always anticipated putting a bit more fuel in towards the end of the Grand Prix. And now, can Coulthard do something about this man, Juan Pablo Montoya? There's the gap, you can see it for yourself, it's 2.7 seconds. Montoya the quicker, and he spun! Montoya spun! Backs it into the wall, no damage will be done, and he'll get away again. Coulthard leads the Grand Prix.
Yep, Coulthard the winner here in 1997. Can he repeat? Juan Montoya has made a terrible mistake. Well, he's made a mistake and he's shaking his head. He can't really believe it. But it's allowed David Coulthard through, and it'll also have allowed Kimi Raikkonen. There he is. Kimi Raikkonen closing right up now in 3rd place. And he will shortly be attacking the Colombian driver. And let's not forget that right behind Raikkonen is Michael Schumacher. Incredible drama here on the streets of Albert Park. And this is lap 48 of 58.
There's 2nd, 3rd and 4th then, virtually in one camera shot. They've all had differing problems. surprising to see a car spinning in the middle of turn 1 and 2, the first chicane. Maybe his traction control let him down, or he just overcommitted to the corner on the way in, just took too much speed in. I'd like to see a replay of that. Hopefully we'll get one later on. But Montoya then, either driver error or traction control, not quite scooping up the back end of the car. So Coulthard then en route. He must have gained, 5-6 seconds minimum with that. We'll find out any time soon. Well, it took Montoya 43 seconds to do the first sector, and it took Coulthard just 30. So Coulthard must lead by something around, he was about 3 behind. He must lead by about 10 seconds then.
What an extraordinary Grand Prix we've had here. We've had a number of different leaders. We've had Kimi Raikkonen, we've had Montoya, we've now got David Coulthard, we've had Michael Schumacher. This is lap 49. We're in the closing stages now of the Grand Prix, and what is there still left in store? Coulthard leads, Montoya is second, Raikkonen is third, and fourth Michael Schumacher. The giants of Formula One are slugging it out. Into the closing stages of a very, very exciting 2003 Foster's Australian Grand Prix here at Albert Park in Melbourne. You're looking at Kimi Raikkonen, who has led a lot of this race but is currently in third place. He has world champion Michael Schumacher behind him, but Schumacher is minus several important aerodynamic pieces on his car. Race leader at the moment, David Coulthard, in the sister McLaren to Raikkonen's. He's 11 seconds. There he is. He's 11 seconds ahead of Juan Montoya, who was leading, but had a spin a few minutes ago, which hopefully we'll have a look at. There it is, Martin.
Yes, I still think it's traction control let him down a little bit there. He was running a touch wide, it has to be said, but I think he'll be disappointed because I think he just floored the throttle, and the electronics didn't catch it maybe in the same way it has on previous laps. That releases Coulthard through. Coulthard is the fastest of the top 4 runners at the moment. What's surprising me is how well Michael Schumacher's hanging on there in the background, despite 2 aerodynamic pieces broken completely off the car. Looked like some kind of design fault. And I could see when he came in for his pit stop that he'd also damaged the under tray. Coulthard says, I love it when I'm leading a Grand Prix. I feel in charge, I feel in control. And he's gone over the line with a 29.1 and a good camera angle, then looking through David Coulthard's steering wheel as he's leading the Grand Prix by 11.7 seconds from Montoya.
Yep, some sensational onboard shots here at Albert Park this afternoon. Forward facing, rear facing, side facing, front wings. We've really enjoyed them, particularly that Coulthard shot. It's amazing to see how calm. Look at his eyes, just studying the racetrack ahead of him. We're a good hour and a half into this Grand Prix. The concentration required, apart from anything else, let alone the physical requirements of driving these cars. These men really are very hard indeed. And Montoya in second place, 11.7 seconds behind. Raikkonen third, Michael Schumacher fourth. But look how close Raikkonen is getting to the back of Montoya. He's taken a second out of him in the last lap, and he's really trying to make up for that drive-through penalty which he incurred for speeding in the pit lane at around three-quarter distance in this Grand Prix. It has been a stunning Grand Prix, you have to say. It's the first one run under the new rules with single-shot qualifying and all sorts of things like not being able to work on the cars between qualifying and the race. Who knows? Perhaps that contributed to the barge board falling off Michael Schumacher's car. Certainly the weather has played a part here today. Whatever, you've had a really stunning Grand Prix because the front three teams are very evenly matched, aren't they, Martin?
Yes, you've got 5 different chassis in the top 6 of the Grand Prix so far. 2 McLarens, 1 Williams, 1 Ferrari, 1 Renault, and Frenzen's in 6th in the Sauber. Coulthard goes over the line, and he's got an 11.6 second lead. He can afford to pace himself now because Raikkonen and Montoya are busy watching each other, but it's Michael Schumacher who's the quickest man. And despite those problems, Schumi is just getting on with it. That must be a real handful, that Ferrari, at the moment. But look, he's keeping those two very, very honest, and don't count him out yet for a podium place.
Absolutely. This is lap 52 of the 58 laps to go, and certainly heading towards a grandstand finish. Well, they've had a bit of rain to endure here, the Melbourne crowd, but they're certainly getting up on their feet now. They sense a bit of a thrilling climax to this Grand Prix. We all do, as Raikkonen closes on Montoya and Schumacher closes on Raikkonen. 3 of the most exciting drivers in Formula One coming very, very close together. David Coulthard, though, at the front. Let's not forget about him. He can sense his 13th Grand Prix victory around the corner, and he must be listening out to every part of his car.
Raikkonen will be ruining. Remember, he went off behind the 2 Renaults after his drive-through penalty. He then had a leery one across the grass and gravel. Otherwise, I think he would have stayed in front of Montoya.
Does it look to you as though Montoya's having a bit of a problem? Because Raikkonen just seemed to be closing up on him pretty quickly.
Yeah, Montoya's car does look a bit of a handful at this stage of the Grand Prix. It's just a tyre balance thing, I think, rather than a specific mechanical balance. And of course, what he's doing, Montoya's backing Raikkonen into Michael Schumacher. That's good news.
Yeah, indeed. It was interesting. I noticed that Montoya didn't change his tyres at that last pit stop. You mentioned, Martin, that the tyres had gone away. They'd had a big dip in form, and clearly the Williams team felt they didn't want to go through that pain again, so leave him out there with the tyres. But perhaps that strategy is, well, it's certainly looking as though it's putting a bit of a pressure on Juan Montoya in the closing stages. And look now, this is great. This is fantastic. Michael Schumacher, Kimi Raikkonen, Juan Montoya, right together. Who knows what's going to happen here as David Coulthard leads into the 53rd lap of 58.
Yeah, so they're lapping all of them now in the 129s, apart from Michael, who did a 128.6. Interestingly, Trulli, Frentzen and Alonso are still all around the same time zone. Everybody going well, but that next batch are some 40 seconds adrift from this leading 4 cars. Coulthard leads by 11.7 from Montoya. Raikkonen just 3/10 down. You can see the gap. Michael Schumacher was 8/10 down last time he went across the start-finish line, but it's surely closer than that now. And then, as I said, Trulli's a further 30-odd seconds behind. Raikkonen locking his wheel into that little hairpin, and that cost him badly. You lose the slingshot onto the pit straight, and suddenly, from being the predator, you're under pressure yourself.
Well, one of the many records that Ferrari and Michael Schumacher have been able to accumulate over the last few amazing years is an unbroken string of podiums, 53 in total, stretching back to Europe 1999. He's 4th at the moment. Is this going to be that progress broken? Lovely onboard shot there before.
They'll need a little bit of fuel in that Ferrari at the end, otherwise there's a chance it'll be underweight as Pizzonia drops out of the Grand Prix. He was 12th. 12 runners then at the moment. But 2 barge boards and a good chunk of floor missing weighs quite a lot. So they better hope that Ferrari's got a bit of extra fuel left at the end to make sure they're within the rules at the end of this Grand Prix.
And there's Fisichella, seems to be having a few problems. Giancarlo Fisichella was in 9th place. Yep, diving into the pit lane.
Sounded fuel related. It was spluttering and struggling. It sounded more like a sort of a fuel related problem there rather than a terminal situation for Fisichella, but he too looks like he could be out of the race. And look, once again Raikkonen then rebuilds an attack on Montoya. Coulthard 12.3 ahead now. He's looking comfortable, subject to reliability. But these 3, who knows what's going to happen? We know that Williams has got a great donkey in it with the BMW engine, but don't forget, Mercedes-Benz stole a very top man from BMW over the winter, and I think they've improved quite significantly too. So if Raikkonen can get in the slipstream, surely he'll have a go up the inside. Raikkonen versus Montoya, with 5-time world champion Michael Schumacher with a watching brief. Doesn't get any better than this in the last few laps of a Grand Prix.
Certainly doesn't. Yeah, Mercedes have made enormous progress over the winter. I know one of the McLaren insiders telling me that they reckon it's the biggest step they've ever had out of Mercedes-Benz. The step from the end of last season to the engine they're racing here today. An enormous gain in horsepower, and you can see it for yourself really. It's been fairly evenly matched. Ferrari looked to have the edge through qualifying, but on race day the McLarens have been very quick. The Williams has been fairly quick, and certainly at the moment holding second position in the hands of Juan Montoya. You can't criticise that. It's been a very solid drive by Montoya, but a very exciting climax here.
The problem Michael's going to have, I mean, he's adapted his driving to suit that car. He's got a lot more understeer, and he's turning in harder and earlier, and he's really compensating. The problem he's really going to struggle with is if he gets anywhere near the slipstream of that McLaren, he'll pick up even more understeer, and I think that'll stop Michael Schumacher really mounting a challenge this afternoon with those aero pieces missing. Coulthard then crosses the line. He's into lap 56
of the 58 lap race, and just remind you that we've got a new points system this season. Points now down to 8th place, and that's great news. The first recipients of that are likely to be Fernando Alonso on his first run for Renault, who's currently 7th, and 8th Ralf Schumacher. It's 10-8. 10 points for the win, 8 for second now instead of the old 6, and then it's 6 for third, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 down to 8th place. Coulthard leading, lap 56, Montoya second, Raikkonen third, Michael Schumacher fourth, as they have been for the last few laps, just staring at each other like a bunch of prize fighters, just waiting for it all to go off. Is it going to go off in the closing stages, or are they going to finish like this? Behind them, Jarno Trulli, who's had a very interesting race actually, up the front, the early stages, dropped right back through the fuel stops. But he's obviously done very well to get himself back up into 5th place. Frentzen 6th after his fantastic grid slot of 4th place and running light in that Sauber. He's managed to hold on to 6th place. Alonso 7th, 8th Ralf Schumacher. Villeneuve and Button in 9th and 10th. We saw them lose out due to the pit stop strategies. Verstappen a lap down. Fisichella we saw spluttering just a minute ago. So just the 11 runners in the final couple of laps here at Melbourne, and are we going to get one of these three having a pass at each other?
We're in that unfortunate aero zone now, where even if you've got a faster car, you start losing front grip, and Raikkonen just not quite fast enough to get into the slipstream to get a good tow down the pit straight and have a go into turn 1, which is where he's most likely to. And so you lose grip through that last corner, and look how in the clear air Montoya was able to pull away quite comfortably. VAR threw it away by going for a 3-stopper this afternoon, and they didn't fuel long for that middle stint, and that's what's cost them, I think, some World Championship points today. They'll feel very disappointed, I think, at the end of this Grand Prix. Coulthard then on lap 57 leads by 12.1 now, and there's the gap between 2nd, 3rd and 4th.
So as winding down towards the finish, that's the mechanics on David Coulthard's car, and there's a pit reporter, name of Ted Kravitz, lurking, ready for the interview, ready to find out what the McLaren team made of this afternoon's Grand Prix. Well, they took the decision some time ago when they saw the pace of this 2002 Ferrari, which Michael Schumacher's racing here. When they saw that car early last year, they thought, we've got to change our tactics here. We've got to think of something really radical for 2003. They took the deliberate decision to bring out the car as late as 4th or 5th Grand Prix of the season, and then they modified for this season last year's chassis. This is it then, with Kimi Raikkonen in your shot and David Coulthard out front. It's got a new rear end, lots of changes, and it really has made a big difference, as we've seen here at Albert Park this afternoon. McLaren on the pace at Melbourne. There is the race leader, David Coulthard. Williams, the only one of the top 3 teams to bring their new car here, and at the moment it seems to be reliable, running in 2nd place with Montoya. And Michael Schumacher, minus various aero bits like barge boards and floor, in 4th place. He looks as though he's settled for that, hasn't he, Martin?
I don't think he's got the car to challenge with. Raikkonen's the only man who can make a difference now, and he's not close enough. So it looks like this is how it's going to finish, unless Montoya makes a mistake. Coulthard just cruising around in the lead now. On his final lap, of course. This will be the 2nd time he's won the Australian Grand Prix. And and Raikkonen then, no, just nowhere near close enough to have a go.
So a very eventful race indeed. It started under the clouds, which had brought rain about an hour before the start of the Grand Prix. Lots of unpredictability. Kimi Raikkonen made a pit stop before the race even started. And we've had several different leaders. Juan Montoya in the early stages, Kimi Raikkonen as well. And finally, David Coulthard. It's really been the new rules package, been laid out for the first time for everyone to see, whether it's spiced up the Grand Prix action. Certainly the weather conditions have done that. But there's no question that this has been a great spectacle. Very, very close racing. Just a couple of corners to go now for David Coulthard. He won here back in 1997. Are those eyes smiling? I wouldn't be at all surprised if they are, because David Coulthard from Twynham in Scotland wins the Australian Grand Prix for the second time in his career, his 13th Grand Prix victory, and Martin Brundle, who is relatively closely associated with him, is smiling. Montoya second, third Raikkonen, and fourth Michael Schumacher. And well, what did you think of that?
What a great Grand Prix. Super, wasn't it? Unpredictable, half distance. We had no idea who was going to win the Grand Prix, and it looked like it was between Raikkonen and Schumacher, and it ended up between Coulthard and Montoya. Montoya making a mistake or losing his traction control. Raikkonen speeding in the pit lane and going off. Michael Schumacher bouncing down the grass. Is that what caused his barge board to come off? I tend to think not. I think it was a design fault, and Coulthard keeping his head and driving a very mature race, coming through and winning by 8.6 seconds.
Can you please make room?
Please move to the side, people.
Please, make
Move to
room.
the side.
Move.
Woo!
When did you go? Did it go on entry? On entry?
Yeah, a little bit, but no, turn in and you know there is just come around.
Come here.
Jeremy, here they come onto the podium. David Coulthard on the podium with Kimi Räikkönen and Juan Pablo Montoya. To David Coulthard, the winning driver, the trophy presented to him by the Honourable Steve Bracks MP, the Premier of Victoria. David Coulthard, winner of the Foster's Australian Grand Prix 2003. To the winning constructor, West McLaren Mercedes, represented by their Managing Director Martin Whitmarsh, the trophy presented by Ted Kunkel, President and CEO of Foster's Group. Well done, McLaren Mercedes. And to the second place driver, Juan Pablo Montoya, the trophy presented to him by Kathy Freeman. And to the third place driver, Kimi Räikkönen, the trophy presented by Colin Osborne, the President of the Confederation of Australian Motorsport. Well done, Kimi. And there is the first podium of 2003, and the champagne flies!